Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry, John. I'm just fiddling with the Google slide screen. I'll go ahead and begin then. And thanks very much, John. First of all, I'll notice the great way to begin a presentation on, called Zoomdemic, that we are, the hosts are a Zoomier bunch than we'd intended today. We all intended to be in the room eating donuts with you, John, but because of family illnesses and other kinds of commitments, some of us are home, and thanks, Ken, very much for being the representative of the hosts in the room. So again, my apologies for that. I wonder if we could begin just by going around. I think that these kinds of things, especially when we want them to be conversations, are good if we have a better sense of who we are. If we all just sort of introduce ourselves briefly. Normally, when I go to these meetings, it feels like I know almost everybody, but always only like almost. There's always a face or two who I'm totally sure of. So I will begin just by introducing myself. I'm Michael Murphy. I direct the college writing program, the first year writing program, English 101 and 102 in the English department, and coordinate writing across the curriculum. I don't know if Stephanie and Ken and Amanda, maybe you guys want to begin, and then we could just quickly get introductions from everybody else.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Stephanie Pritchard. If you don't know me, I teach in the English and Creative Writing department as well, and I'm the assistant director for writing across the curriculum. Good morning.
Hi there, my name is Amanda Trainham, and I also teach in the English and Creative Writing department. I teach English 102, and I'm one of the writing fellows on campus, working primarily with the School of Business.
I'm Kenneth Nichols in the English and Creative Writing department. I also, in addition to teaching first year writing, I teach playwriting, and this semester I get to teach fiction for the first time. So that'll be fun.
Thanks. Great. And could we just go by volunteer? Maybe first, maybe it's for to make it easy. We go around the physical room first. Just if everybody could introduce and say hello.
Sure, I'm Maggie, assistant professor in criminal justice and associate director of SELP for now. And then
Jessica Harris, assistant professor in health promotion and wellness. And while Maggie's out, I'll be helping John as assistant director as well.
John Kane in the economics department, SELT, and they got Young Band that's going back on tour this spring.
Thanks very much. And other people on the screen?
I'm Lynn Blanchfield. I'm in the Department of History, and I'm also a Fulbright program advisor on campus.
Linda Oxenbein, and I teach English and sorry, I'm not quite awake. I teach literature and English composition, and I can't think of anything else. I haven't had an unbreak break, if you understand what I mean, and I think you probably do. It's like, where's the break in my break? I don't know. I haven't found it yet. I'm running out of time.
She has, I can attest to that.
Go ahead, Casey.
I'm Casey Raymond. I'm in chemistry and the associate director of the campus honors program.
Thanks, Casey.
Ibru Altai Damkasi, extended learning, ESL programs manager.
Thanks, Ibru. And I think we have just Mike and Morgan left.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Morgan Bond. I'm the resource sharing electronic resources and systems librarian.
Thank you.
Mike Reach, I teach creative writing, graphic storytelling, writing about literature for freshmen as well. So, hello.
Thanks very much, Mike, and thanks everybody. Thanks also for coming. I'll share my screen here, and I'll probably do this awkwardly. I don't know, actually. I think I could view and go to slideshow. Yeah, and still have you up. Welcome to the panel discussion. I think everybody's probably heard something at this point about sort of student deficits as a result of pandemic. and especially kind of the crippling effects of Zoom. You know, we started out kind of I started out kind of noting that I think we all have felt sort of hamstrung by Zoom and Zoom classes, that they feel less effective kind of than face-to-face. Again, lots of people want to talk about deficits, especially in this kind of like tangible way, as if there are these particular sorts of things that we could identify as student weaknesses as a result of Zoom. We talked about that together, the writing fellows and I, especially in terms of writing. And I guess we wanted to get a better sense from people around campus of what they were seeing. We had some sense kind of what we saw in classes, and I'm not sure that it felt to us like entirely tangible kinds of skills. So again, we thought this would be a useful conversation to have. I think everybody's heard about this, but we thought we would begin just with a little sort of quick review of the press that this is kind of gotten. This is from US News and World Report. I believe, and John, I'm sure you can correct me about this if I'm wrong, but the National Assessment of Educational Progress, I think, is a report that is sponsored by the National Center for Education Statistics. Do you know?
I'm not sure. It could be I think so. I think they're the ones who handle it for the Department of Ed. It comes from a report card, the National Report Card data collection.
Okay, yes. And I point that out only to suggest that this is a pretty reliable kind of a source. Based all of these statistics that I'll give you at the beginning are based on test scores, which to my mind, at least, makes them, conditional in some way. But again, the National Center for Education Statistics is a division of the Department of Ed that's normally cited to talk about developments in higher ed. They noted these are on the basis of test scores. My memory is tests given in 4th and 8th grade, but average math scores declining by 7 points between 2020 and 2022, a 12-point decline among the lowest achieving students. Reading scores declining 5 points across the same period, lowest performing students posting a 10-point decline. So similar, not quite as significant, but similar. And also the last line, the researchers conclude, I thought was kind of telling. Students are performing at a level last seen 2 decades ago. Lots of discussion of the ways that students do a little better on standardized tests than they used to. We also noted, that this was happening. The ACT finds that this is happening at the level of students entering college too. And again, this is a function of ACT exams. It's a measure of ACT exams, but the graph kind of speaks for itself. I think those exams in particular kind of were conditioned by were affected by all of the craziness of pandemic and altered circumstances of students taking the exam. I think many fewer students took the exam than had before. So all kinds of reasons that this is sort of an apples and oranges thing, but again, a kind of clear development at the level of the graph. As students got to college too, about a quarter of freshmen report having felt very unprepared for college, and additional 35% felt somewhat unprepared, according to a Inside Higher Ed survey on June 2021. I don't have a baseline on this. I don't know what the number normally is, but a little over half seems to me pretty significant. Also at the level of students on campus. College students, right? Students who felt like what they learned at school was less significant than what they had done in the past seems really high, and it was kind of frighteningly high. I learned less than I have in the past, 52%. We also noted that according to UNICEF and UNESCO and the World Bank, that the kind of effect, is sort of measured in dollars, but the kind of effect that this might have, these sorts of deficits might have on the general function of the world seemed really significant. They measure it as 14% of today's global GDP, which seems to me kind of astonishing. So a kind of general review of what things have what kinds of attention, the discussion that this issue's gotten before now. When we talked about this as a group, we sensed deficits kind of like inside the classroom, things that had to do specifically with student performance, and then sort of extra class, outside class issues too. Some again connected to specific sort of writing and thinking issues, but then some connected to sort of bigger issues. And so I might now call on my co-presenters these are the issues that came up in our discussion. If Amanda and Stephanie and Ken, if you guys want to just speak to these. Amanda, yours was the first one.
Okay, sure. So while we were making this list, that a lot of us had very similar ones that we were explaining, or a lot of them have very similar ones that we experienced. But one of the ones that I thought was really telling, especially being that I'm a writing instructor, is that students were having a lot of difficulty with performing analysis, not only in their essays, but during class. I don't know if any of you had the same experience, but I spent significantly more time last semester specifically explaining prompts, explaining assignments, students lost in assignments, not understanding their assignments. And so one of the biggest detriments, I think, that has sprouted from the Zoomdemic or this COVID is that students have a very difficult time determining and analyzing even some of the most simple tasks. And I don't know if any of you had that same experience in your classes, especially those of us who are teaching maybe freshmen or students who just aren't in college or just starting college for the first time.
Great, thanks, Amanda.
So I'm going to speak to the next two bullets sort of simultaneously. And it's worth mentioning that I'm going into this discussion a little bit biased, even though I'm going to try not to be. And the reason that I feel that way is that this past fall, I taught 4 classes and all of them were freshmen only. So that is really still weighing like very heavily on my mind, you know, in lots of different ways. And that's where some of this came from. But I will say that, you know, when we were thinking about and brainstorming what some of the problems were that we've seen the last couple of years, both of these, you know, both of my bullet points, I think do hold true. Like, I think that they were just really obvious this past fall, right? And I mean, for all of us too, you know, we just came out of the fall semester. So I think we're probably all thinking about the fall semester and what the spring is going to look like. So I did just want to kind of preface that a little bit. I will say that in all of my classes, I teach scaffolded writing assignments in my English composition classes, and even in the creative writing classes too. Many of the assignments are kind of designed to build on each other to get a little bit more complex. You know, we start with something a little bit more simple, and then, you know, as everybody builds more skills, it gets more complicated, right? Because they have more knowledge to do that. So, but I will say that, like, this past fall, especially, in addition to doing the prep work before they get the assignment, right? Whatever readings or like in-class work that we might do, in addition to getting a detailed assignment sheet, in addition to talking about the assignment sheet, right? And those sorts of things, it didn't seem to be enough. They wanted more. Like, they wanted examples of like successful student work from the past, which I do a little bit in my classes, but I actually tend to go the opposite way. I tend to show examples of like how something was done really wrong and use that as like a confidence builder. So I had all of those in place, right? But they didn't want that. They wanted the good work, right? They wanted the really good stuff, and they wanted to follow it to a T. They didn't want a bad example, because I think that they were afraid that they were going to do it badly too. And I think a lot of that came to their own confidence when it comes to writing, especially. So I thought that was really interesting, that they were like hungry for these samples, and almost in a way where they were afraid to be creative and to think outside the box in their own way, which kind of connects to the analysis stuff that Amanda was talking about. You know, they were having a hard time coming up with their own original ideas because I think they were afraid to. So they wanted extra explanations, extra examples, all of those sorts of extra things. And then the other thing, which I do in my classes anyway, I have the luxury of doing that in a writing class, right, is that I had built some time in class for in-class work. You know, we do in-class writing prompts. They write informally, they share their informal writing, which I think is really important. But they also, and what I started doing even more so, was setting time aside in class for them to work on some of their assignments, especially the scaffolded assignments. I would devote like a whole class period. I would say, bring your laptop, bring your headphones, you know, this is your opportunity to work during class time, and I'm here so that you can ask me questions. And I will say confidently that some of the students in my classes, had we not done that, would not have turned things in. Because, you know, they were using that class time to do more than they should have been using it to do, right? But they would, you know, they would kind of wait on that and rely on that. I'll also, and this is my last thing that I'll say, I had the benefit of having an embedded tutor in my composition class this past fall. This is something, if you're interested in the program, it's brand new and it's run by Casey Town out of OLS. I'll put her name in the chat. But the nice thing about this is that these are students who work in the tutoring center already. So they're either writing tutors or they can be content tutors if you teach a content class. So I had a writing tutor who served as an embedded tutor in my course. So this is actually, it's like a paid position, and this student got paid to come to my English 102 class, and he never missed a class. And it was great because I've had him in class before, so he and I already had a really wonderful relationship. Having him in the classroom, especially for those in-class work days, was huge, because now there are two of us who are going around helping students with their writing, answering questions, all of those sorts of things. And it's a great experience for the embedded tutor, but it's also so nice, you know, like with all the freshmen, you know, they talk to me, obviously, but they loved him. You know, and like he was sort of like a role model. He like joked around with them. He wants to be a teacher too. So it was great practice for him to get that kind of practice in the classroom. So having him in class also in just that one section gave us the opportunity to kind of tag team and work together. I said a lot of things. I'm sorry for talking so long. Ken.
Yeah, no, you're fine, Stephanie. I thought a lot in the fall semester about the conditions under which the freshmen had been suffering for the previous 2 years, where they're attending class via Zoom if they're attending and not just leaving Zoom on and going somewhere else, or they're driving. I had one kid cook pancakes during class, just cooking pancakes during class, and filling their time with screens and more screens with little interaction. Especially because of the insanity, the standards were reduced, and teachers were understandably accepting less to pass the students. All of the insanity, I think it's manifested itself in the students. They've spent 2 years focused only on their phones, you know, playing Minecraft and doing the TikTok, and so it's hard for them to get back into the mindset of achievement, of just the normal work of school. I think we've all had an increase in the number of students who have serious, who have mental health problems. I had some students with, you know, some really bad things happening. But then also just the general malaise. I've seen a massive increase in just general malaise where, you know, I'll have one of my students, when she did attend class, she'd just sit in the back on her laptop, didn't turn any work in. And then like 3 weeks before the end of the semester, she's like, oh, I really want to pass this class. Can I turn in work? And I'm like, well, so turn in work. I don't know. But I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but especially something like writing, it's a cognitive process that builds on your previous experiences. And if your previous experiences are pretending to go to class and, you know, and not being expected to read anything in high school, it doesn't help. It doesn't work. So that's what I've been seeing. And I don't know if anyone else has manifested that.
Yes. I've been seeing that as well. Yeah.
And there's been a lot of agreement with all the points in chat, especially the embedded tutoring. So
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I just like, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Ken, I think a lot of it, and we talked about this when we were having a meeting about this presentation, is that students are experiencing a higher level of apathy right now. And it's not just like self-apathy, meaning I don't think they necessarily want to be apathetic, but my students have talked to me in explicit detail that they are getting apathetic by proxy, essentially, meaning they're seeing the apathy from their classmates, either in the class or outside of class, and their peers, and they're feeling apathetic or just like they just don't care as a side effect of being around other students who don't care. So it's like this cycle of apathy that's existing for students, at least for the freshman cohort or for the ones that I was serving the past semester.
I know with, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Please, Mike.
I was just gonna say with the writing, I teach the English 204, which is, it's the creative writing learning community. It's kind of like 15 to 16 writing creative writing majors that are coming in, and then a couple education students too, always get kind of shoved in there. And this was probably the worst I've seen as far as like their skills. Usually I have like 4 or 5 like exceptional writers, and that just didn't appear this time. And unfortunately, my 2 strongest writers never came. Like I had to beg them to come to class. And like, I was trying to explain to them that I was a screw up like that and waited too long. And you can end up really damaging your early college career that way. And I think, like you said, some of the assignments that were pretty basic, they needed pushing. I have very short, like 1 paragraph assignments to start building to a 3 to 5 page paper, or 4 to 5 page paper, and they just had no sense of that. Where normally that group had people that were capable. They just hadn't done it. And like you said, the apathy spreads, right? So you kind of have students that don't come ever, and you go from a class of 18 to 13 every week. And it's just a weird vibe, but you feel bad because those kids, like I said, some of them were the stronger students, so it kind of hurt. I'd get their papers in and I'd be like, I wish you were in class with us because it would help the other students. That level of helping other students just with discussions, it can raise the bar of the conversations. And if certain students never come, it really hurts it. And I think they all like wrote that email like, oh, can I pass? And it's like, we're like 3 months in and you've come to 1 class. Like, no, you can't pass. So it's just, and I flagged them, I wrote them, and I think the other thing that affects them, which we haven't really talked about here, and which my son's going through, he's a junior in high school, is a lot of students. I know they had talked about how great the GPA of all the students coming in is, and it's fake. It's a fake GPA. So these students think they're, great students, and they've yet to be a good student. And that's a bad thing. A lot of my son's classmates were getting similar. My son's a very strong student and works really hard. And he was frustrated during COVID because other students who aren't doing as much are getting like a point less than him because they exist and are alive. And then now they've shifted back, and all those kids are getting like 80s and 70s, and he's still getting high 90s. And I'm like, it works out, but it's hard on them. Those other kids are confused. And I think a lot of the students coming in are kind of confused what school is now, because they had 2 years of just, I go to school for 2 hours Tuesday and Thursday, and then I go home and I play Minecraft, like you said, or talk, or I pass my test by cheating online, so it's, anyway, I didn't mean to babble, but that was kind of where I've seen those things. And usually, like I said, this group is usually super strong and they were a little weaker, but the saddest part was the kids just didn't, a class, which is just all about showing up, they're not showing up,
Yeah, no, you're not babbling at all, Mike. And let me take Lynn. You looked like you wanted to say something to specifically to what Mike.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my fall talking with Stephanie about our classes. So I'm sort of nodding a lot, but as a counterpoint, I taught a group of first-year honor students in the fall. As Casey knows, I teach honors classes every fall and every spring. And a lot of them were very good writers. And they did attend class, and these are the really smart, diligent students who are just really committed to college. And what I'm seeing with them, which was rather interesting in terms of their writing, was, I think someone mentioned it, was a lack of confidence, because they had been writing all of these assignments and just getting high marks for everything because they were doing their work. They didn't know how to take chances about things. And I'm seeing both a fear of making mistakes and a lack of confidence in them to sort of take some chances with things. So, and of course, the main thing is getting them in the classroom. And I can totally see where if you have a class of 18 and you go down to 13, that dynamic, that classroom environment that you have that should be building confidence is lacking, right? And if you don't show up to class, you're missing a lot of that ability and a lot of that interaction so that you can build confidence and realize I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's suffering here. I'm not the only one who's having difficulty. I'm not the only one who has anxiety about this. But if you're not showing up, you're not getting any of that, right? So with the honor students, what I have been, they were always diligent about their assignments. They always did their work. But again, it's that lack of confidence and that lack of ability to just try something and not worry too much about the grade, but about pushing themselves. And they would, to Stephanie's earlier points about giving them more and more and more structure, more and more and more instructions about things. I gave the honor students less instruction and they said, we want a template for how to write the paper. And I said, no, you're not getting it. Nope. Here are the questions, give it a try. And it was the first paper and they said, so how is this supposed to look? I don't know. It's up to you what you want to do. And that was scary for them. That was very scary, but I knew they could handle it. Right. So I think we have to instill confidence in them, and we have to, I hope I did with them was to instill confidence and say, yeah, you can do this. I trust you. And if you screw up the first time, okay, you can always do better the second time. You've got chances. But if you're not showing up to class, you're not doing the assignments, you're not doing the basic work that we expect them to do, you're not going to get another chance, right? You're not going to be able to build that confidence. And again, that's something we all have to talk about. How do we build confidence in them to say, you know what, you might screw up the first time. We all do. But how do you come back from that? Right. That's the key, I think.
Yeah. Let me jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, because I'll just jump in here quickly to make the last point on the screen, which is related to, I think, to lots of things that people have said. Part of, Ken and Amanda and Mike too, you were kind of suggesting, I think that, the first thing that I guess I noticed was that the energy of the students declined significantly across the semester. That is, they got winded fast. And there was this kind of exhaustion that set in toward like the end of October, like they were, one foot in front of another, both intellectually and physically. And so again, it seemed like a really significant kind of pattern, especially this last semester. I will also say, you guys have been talking about, I'd say, the way that students learned kind of to do school. Like it's as if I think they learned some alternate version, some version that we have not been used to of what it's like just to do school. And a big part of it, I think you're right, totally right, Lynn, is this sense that school is this place where you take some chances, discover some things. It's not simply about this like grade that you walk away with, and God forbid that it should be something, less than what everybody else does, as you point out, Mike. I think that's a common kind of anxiety for students. The thing I was going to say, I will offer this little sort of like silver lining, at least in my limited kind of experience. I had a really small sample with English 102 last semester. And I will say they were not all first year students. I had a relatively large number, 5 or 6 sophomores, maybe 1 junior. But I think they were mainly sophomores. I will say though, at the beginning of the semester, they seemed really, it was almost as if my sense of what was going on in their mind was, it was as if, oh, we'd been hearing for years these things about like college and, how exciting it would be. And so, it hasn't been that for a while. Like, let's see what this is really like. That is in my English 102, in the second unit of the course, I often ask them to choose between different potential pieces for us to read and maybe discover one of their own. Not only did they seem more interested in the choice, but they also seemed interested in the kinds of pieces that I always want students to be interested in, but that usually they aren't. Like there was a piece, I offered them a piece that they chose and really wanted to read called Against Argument, which is a short piece, Boston Review, by a philosophy professor at University of Chicago, Agnes Callard, which essentially argues that what argument ought to be for is to deepen our understanding of things, and not to persuade one another. We shouldn't think about argument in terms of like winning or losing. We should think about the ways in which it enriches our thoughts. And she sort of talks about Socrates. And anyway, they wanted to read that. And they just seemed like their interest seemed piqued in a way that seemed to me sort of encouraging. So that was my, again, kind of silver lining glimpse of hope, the sense that I think my experience anyway, is that in part that students are hoping that there is something that happens at college that's different from this understanding of, Zoom University or whatever that they've begun to work from. So anyway, I guess again I wanted to make that point quickly, and I'll just say you guys have already begun to move toward. We were going to just sort of ask people about. Again, we wanted to set this up in part to find out what had been going on as people sort of experienced as people worked with students. Both in terms, like you were saying, Mike, of particular kinds of skills. I'm really interested in that. But we also, I think our conversation here so far has quickly turned to sort of questions of like general intellectual temperament, which is what I think we felt like was most at stake with our students when we taught this group. So anyway, now I'll apologize for talking too long and just sort of reopen discussion. I don't know what other people's experiences have been. I didn't mean to I was just kind of piggybacking on Lynn's point about taking chances. I don't know if that's been an experience common to other people or.
Well, I'll say that what Lynn said made me think about kind of the framework of the past 2 years of education during the pandemic. It was passive. You just log into Zoom, you maybe turn in a half-page paper, and that's like it's very passive by necessity or whatever. But obviously, we want something more active where you attend class. You raise your hand, just as Casey did. You contribute. You come up with different thoughts, and you have to be active. You can't just fill a couple boxes and click submit. So I think that's the theoretical framework that we're struggling with.
Okay, Casey has a few people up their hands up.
I'll take down our slides now.
So, I'm from the chemistry standpoint, I give students large number of practice questions, but the homework online that they need to do is usually only 1 or 2 questions at a time. Now I might give them 3 assignments over a 2-week period to work on, plus the end of week quiz, but they have unlimited attempts. It's amazing how many students will do it just once, not get it right, and just never do anything again. As opposed to the fact of going to tutors, coming to see me in office hours, so on and so forth. And kind of building on what Lynn talked about, we worked with the Honors 150, the first year seminar class, and they do a lot of short writings in that class, and really in the 2 to 5 page paper range throughout the semester. But they're always asking, well, how long does this paper need to be? And my response is typically, well, whatever it needs to be. And they're like, but I said, there's a time and a place where a page limit or a word count is really important. But for a lot of things, it's not. And so you should use enough space to address the assignment without rambling. You know, and I will typically say, okay, it really probably should be a couple pages and it probably shouldn't be more than 10. And they're just aghast that there's that big a range. And so it is a challenge. They seem to be so programmed with the, you know, this, I got to follow all these steps and do this thing, and there's not multiple ways to do it. And it's a challenge.
Yeah, I have to agree with what you're saying. I scaffold, my final writing assignment ends up being, and they get just gobsmacked by the page range. I say it's somewhere between 8 to 13 pages, being that some students can produce 13 pages without rambling, and other students, they cannot. 8 pages is sufficient, and it gets the job done just as well as somebody else's 13 pages. But they get just kind of floored that there could be such a range, such a huge discrepancy. And I don't know. It's just a very interesting realization that they're having, that it's not formulaic, and they expect a formula. And even in something like chem that has formulas, even the writing for that, they're just like, I don't understand. Everything else is a formula. So why isn't this? I think they're kind of put off on it by
Linda
it.
has a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off.
Linda, did you?
No, that's okay, because my comment was outside of that direct address to those questions, so that's not a problem. I just, as we talk about all of this, I something that I was just had to be very aware of this semester, like, I mean, I already was really, but what we're seeing in students, a lot of it is the effects of trauma. And, you know, it's like, we're still not really through all of this either, but we're dealing with what's left after having, I mean, a lot of our students have lost family members and people close to them. And it's like, you know, you don't see that on the outside. I've lost family members and friends close to me throughout this, indirectly and directly from the pandemic. And then you put in the whole factor of the political things going on and the racial things going on, and everybody, no matter who you are, is affected by all of that. And so we're trying to do normal in a situation, you know, if there ever was a normal, we're trying to do normal in a situation, a climate that isn't really quite normal. But I always say that chaos always is. It's just like, it's an illusion when we think there isn't. But like, I'm not going to get philosophical with it though. But so with the students, it's like trying to help them find things that they're not coming in with the things that they usually would come in with. Socially, psychologically, intellectually, etc. All of those things. And so it's almost like, to solve the problem, it's a multifaceted problem. So we have to solve it in a multifaceted, or address it in a multifaceted way. And I hear some of that with like how we're all trying to structure our assignments. And I think that is a component of it. And I'm also feeling like, I don't know how this is going to work. It kind of goes against, you know, my inclination in teaching, but I feel like I need way more one-on-one time initially with students, and then more throughout the semester as well, because it's almost like they need to gain confidence in who their instructor is, that they're really not just a person standing up there, another voice in all this world of voices the past 4 years. That's kind of what we are when we stand up there. And that this is not a usual circumstance now. So I feel like we have to, they respond so well, it seems, when we work with them one-on-one, that I think we need more of that probably early in the semester, so that they gain that confidence in us and understand exactly where they are with being in college. And if they know that you're on their side, they're more likely to listen to you, or they're more likely to tell you if they're having a problem. I mean, it doesn't mean every student's going to pass or anything like that, but they know somebody's on their side and is like helping them. They can ask, they can work around it. You can try and resolve a problem for them. And if it can't be resolved, like, you know, in the way like they finish the course or whatever, you can find another way. But this is kind of, we're in a place where we have to find a different way to get to the goal, and maybe sometimes even think, okay, well, you're going to have to withdraw from this class, or you're definitely going to fail this, but here's the plan for you taking the course again. And, you know, you have this, all the stuff before you that you've done this semester, and that will work for you next semester. I mean, it's kind of like we need to rethink and re-see, because, you know, this is the residuals of trauma that we're dealing with.
I know hands are up, but I'd like to jump in on a couple of things that have come up repeatedly. One is, well, one simple thing is that notion about students asking how long a paper is. I used to give exactly the same response that Casey did, but then I had a conversation with Linda Nielsen that some of you know from the AQ program a few years ago. And what she said is what students are asking when they're asking how long the paper should be, they're not really concerned. Well, sometimes they're concerned about the length, but often what they're really asking is how much work and effort should I put into it? And providing them with a range of pages is really giving, as I think Amanda suggested, is giving them some guidance on how much effort and how much time they should allocate to that. Another thing you could do is you could just put in a time requirement on that, you know, in your discussion, in your outline of the modules that you're using at within Brightspace. Another thing is there was a couple mentions of students asking for examples. One of the things that I think, I agree with everything everyone's been saying about what you've been observing, but one of the things that's happening is not only are we getting students with learning losses because of COVID and move to more passive instruction and so forth, but you know, while we often used to talk about the standards for admission here at Oswego, that pretty much stopped because we pretty much are now open admissions. And the good thing about that is we're reaching a lot of students who never would have gone to college before. But many of those students are coming from situations where they're living in poverty, the school districts are poorly resourced, they lost more during COVID than most other students did because they're going back to homes where they don't have good internet access. If there is internet access and if there's a computer, it's often shared with multiple other people in the household and often had problems connecting to their classes and so forth. And what happens basically, and this came up in a couple of requests that people have mentioned of students for examples of good work. One of the things that is most effective in reducing some of those equity gaps that we observe is providing students with more structure. That's one of the things we'll be talking about in the reading group this semester, and I'd encourage people to consider joining that. But the research by Kelly Hogan, Vici Sathi, and many, many other people suggests that giving students some exemplars of good work, not just one or two great papers, but a variety of papers, because you don't want to limit students' creativity so that they're just trying to copy a model. But if you can find examples of 6 or 7 or 4 or 5 different ways in which students were able to demonstrate their learning with very different approaches without locking them into a rigid structure, that might be helpful in helping them see that a variety of approaches is appropriate. And without locking them into a very rigid structure, which we don't generally want to do. So that structure can be really, really helpful though, because it benefits all students, but it especially benefits those students who are first gen, who come from lower quality schools where they haven't had the same access to resources or the same type of college prep classes, because a lot of our students really haven't had that much exposure to writing instruction in their schools. So just had to jump in on that because we've been talking about that a lot in other workshops. And again, it will be the focus of much of the inclusive reading group.
And I'll just mention that, you know, it's one thing when you're working on a low stakes assignment that is, you know, not graded and you want students to take a chance and, you know, give them that kind of space for creativity, but especially for high stakes assignments, you know, that structure, you know, can really provide students you know, the confidence of, you know, knowing that they are completing work to the expectation that you have, and keeping those expectations from them isn't really in line with inclusive practices.
And I will just jump in really quick too. I do what John was mentioning with different examples and I do sometimes give templates or giving them different ways to see the assignment and how they can kind of approach it. And I've seen the motivation in my students. They're more motivated when they do kind of have those clear expectations and those examples to kind of be free with how they kind of design the assignment in a sense. And sometimes I have them design it with me too, different assignments or things like that, which is kind of gives them that ownership, which gives them then that motivation to complete the assignment successfully.
Stephanie, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I have kind of an observation and some like a general question for the group. I know we only have a few minutes left, but one thing that I've noticed is that if I can get a student into my office like once, you know what I mean, then they'll come back, and I mean, they'll come back again and again and again. It's that first time, right? Like that first hurdle to get them in to try to talk to me. And sometimes it works okay at the beginning of class or at the end of class, but usually things are so chaotic then, right? Because people are leaving and whatever. So I found that if I can get them to come into my office or meet me on Zoom or whatever, then they're so much more likely to come back for extra help again and again. So like one of the things that I've done is I put a little thing in my syllabus. I hide it a little bit, but not too much. And I do have them do syllabus recon on the first day, but I give them the syllabus before class, but then I have them do recon on the first day also in small groups so that it's more likely that people will see it. But I put a thing on my syllabus that says, come visit me in my office during the first 2 weeks of class to like say hi, ask a question, get a lollipop, whatever. And I will give you an extra 10 points on your participation grade at the end of the semester. That's worked okay, but I'm wondering if anybody has other strategies that you use to try to get students to come to see you in office hours, aside from just being delightful on a regular basis.
I've, for a couple of different classes when I've wanted to give really clear, specific feedback verbally to students on their work, I've required it as part of a scaffolded assignment that, not only are we going to work on the introduction of this research paper, but we're also going to meet and talk about the directions of, where it's going, right? And I give them a lot of options over, a couple of weeks, virtual, in person, wherever location, works best for them, and it's a very low stakes, maybe 5 points of their total grade. It's not a huge, thing, but, by kind of building that into the structure of, a larger term assignment, I found that that's worked, pretty well.
Can I speak to Lynn's question about the proper moment for models? I wasn't sure, this is in the chat. Lynn, I wasn't sure what you meant about the proper moment. You mean the proper moment in the semester, in the,
yeah, because
assignment?
I don't want to, I think showing models can be very useful for certain groups. You got to find the moment and find the group that, might benefit. I fear with some students, showing them a model means they're just going to follow that to a T and they're not going to see any other way of doing it. But I'm just wondering at what point, we don't have time to talk about this in depth. At what point is an appropriate time to show these models so that they get the most benefit from them?
I have it ready at the very beginning of class, so
that's where the research generally shows is most effective and that students appreciate most, so they know what the expectations of the work will be over the course of the semester. So letting them see where they're heading, or what your goals are for them in terms of the writing early can be good. And to address that issue of students getting locked in, just make sure you find varied models, and that can help.
Right. I would think though, I think showing them models of good writing might just send some students out the door. They'd just be like, I can't do this. I'm not coming back. That's it. Your expectations are too high. I'm done.
No,
That's my fear.
One thing I like to do myself, I typically show, and I'm glad that this dovetails with the research, John and Maggie. I typically show students early in the process when I offer an assignment or just after models, and especially models that suggest ways that they might be thinking about the assignment and interpret it in kind of a range of ways. In fact, I often assign something that will like resist the terms or stretch the terms of the assignment in some way, so that again, they don't see it as this thing that they don't see it as a kind of a rubric, this thing that their essay is supposed to look like. You know, we can count off these 7 features or whatever. They see it as a way, an aid in sort of helping them wrap their head around what I've asked them to do. But the other thing is, like you're saying, Lynn, will they be intimidated? And you were kind of saying this too, Stephanie. Lots of times, ideally, you don't always get the ideal thing, but lots of times I like to assign a model that is not a perfect example of like what they'll think of as good writing. That is, it will contain some mistakes. It'll have a clumsy transition. It'll, there will be errors at the level of the language and stuff, but that takes up the idea in an interesting way. So again, I think not only are they not intimidated by, but you can have this moment of saying, you can say, oh, how much better would this paper be if this example, were whatever, were something else, or, if they had cited such and such, or considered this idea, again, if there's some kind of weakness, it allows for the possibility of kind of discussing in class what a better move might be. But that's at least been my experience with them.
And like to not, it doesn't completely change gears. Yes, I do give examples of good writing and of poor writing to my students. I think being in English 102, we have the luxury of more activity level or surface level aspects of writing. So I do a lot of diagramming with my students, sentence and paragraph so I will take a whole essay, break it up into paragraphs, and have them logically construct it back in order. Same thing with paragraphs, as a way for them to understand and see there's more than one way to logically construct something, that there's fluidity with writing, that many ways in which topic sentences could be inverted, which kind of changes the function of your paragraph. So even some more basic or lower order things when it comes to examples works really well with students too.
John, let me ask you, are we do we need to end, or can we?
Yeah, I think our next one is in 101. So we do have a few more minutes if people want to.
Great.
Ask any questions.
One of us has to go over there and start that session, but yeah, if people would like to stay longer, we can, because we have the room for longer if needed.
Great. Yeah, Lynn?
I think one of your questions was, how can we use the writing fellows more? Which is, I think, the way to conclude this. And I know we're all so busy, but I have to do a shout out to Stephanie, because our conversations are always so helpful to me about sharing our experiences and how we can help each other in the moment. And I'm wondering if there might be a way we can meet with writing fellows, or have them come in and just observe our class or observe what we're doing, so that we can have a conversation afterwards and say, okay, so this is what you're doing. This is your motivation. This is your objective. What can we do in the future to sort of improve or to help students build more confidence? Because I feel like we all have great intentions at the beginning of the semester. I know I do. And then towards the end of the semester, we're all just frustrated and it's just overwhelming, and we're feeling apathetic, and it's just exhausting. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can build in using these fellows throughout the semester, having them observe our classes. What do you suggest, Mike? What do you suggest, Amanda, Stephanie, anything?
Well, this is something I do pretty frequently, at least with two members of the School of Business. I go into their classes, I do presentations, I meet with them one-on-one and talk about maybe a scaffolded way to approach writing, low risk writing versus high risk writing. So these are like services that we can offer, or at least I have done them before with the School of Business. And I think it works really well. I've seen over time the amount of students coming to my workshops I held for Mary Tone Rogers, who retired. She's no longer on campus, but like it started with 2 students and then it moved to 7, then it moved to 18. So the amount of students going to it has exponentially increased. So I at least I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone. I think that's one of the things we really like doing is working explicitly with professors, helping them engage their students, or maybe helping them see writing in a new way, the ideas about writing in a very new way.
And yeah, I mean, most of us have been teaching for so long that sometimes we get a little bit blinded because we haven't been a student for so long. So it's nice to have a peer just give us feedback, in a loving, happy way. I've done that in the past too for other teachers. It's not like evaluation. It's just having someone point out what's going on because you can't see it because you're running the class.
And we do have that open classrooms project, which I'd encourage people to consider participating in. We'll be doing that again later this semester. We'll be talking about that later today.
Yeah, I've participated in that and it's a wonderful experience for both. I was the observer for both the observers and the observed. It's a great experience.
I was going to say that we can absolutely do that, Lynn. And in fact, I think that we've always thought of that as one of our sort of basic kinds of functions that, that's the kind of support that we've offered. Though I will say that in the descriptions that we've sent to campus, I don't think we've emphasized this sense that fellows might come to your class and be a sort of a supportive colleague and peer. And, when you're doing a writing activity, they might give you some thoughts about it. So I think we could do that in the future. And also to Stephanie's point, I was going to, just getting ready to get in touch with John to say we did not manage to resume the talking writing sessions last fall, but I want to do that this spring. Sure. So we could have, it's been in the past, it's been me, but I could try to set them up at a time when you would get the benefit of Stephanie and Ken and Amanda's thoughts. So we certainly could have that kind of at least a couple of sessions where we talked about arranging those kinds of interactions with faculty.
And we do have lots of tea, and I don't know if you noticed, but the microphones have gotten a bit better here so that people coming in on Zoom can hear everyone a little bit better than in the past. So
totally. Yes. Hey, you guys have sounded great. So
okay.
Right. Other
Now,
thoughts?
Before everyone leaves, I do have a question. Have you all looked at ChatGPT?
We had a discussion of it, and I haven't looked at it closely. I don't know if Ken has, but we had a discussion about it, and I was thinking just before winter breakout began that we should that was a session that we should have had.
We do have a session scheduled for next Friday, but I'm just wondering what your reactions have been to it.
I don't know exactly. I have sensed that the writing is getting, there's an indefinable quality that I can't pinpoint in some papers, and I'll do the good old fashioned Googling the sentences that don't look quite right. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know how pervasive it is right now, but I'm participating in I don't know if you know PackBack. I guess you know everything about that. So there is anti-AI writing technology to help sniff it out, and so I don't know how. In fact, I don't know.
There is, and it's very effective in the first draft of something that ChatGPT creates. It's another artificial intelligence program that detects patterns. But if you have something written by ChatGPT and you give it the command to rewrite this in a manner that's not detectable by GPT detection software, it will do it, and then the detection rate drops to close to 0.
Wow.
So it has learned essentially to rewrite itself so that it's not as easily detectable.
But then it's an arms race, which it literally is. Like,
which, yeah.
John, do you have any sense of, because for example, I do scaffolded essays, meaning it starts as a 2-page, goes to a 5-page, goes to a blah, so there's 4 drafts over the course of the semester. Do you have any knowledge or instinct on whether or not they could input already existing essays and add to them with the original content still in place? You see what I'm saying? Like all they're doing is adding a piece of it, so they're just manipulating pieces of their paragraphs, not changing the whole thing.
Right. And that's one of the best ways around it, to do a
That's what
lot
I
of
was-
scaffolding and to give feedback along the way and so forth. But even then, it can be used to generate sections of a paper or something similar.
Okay.
But but then you
So-
get to the question of, we've got Grammarly, you've got Google's auto, suggestions and so forth. This is just going a little bit further. And some people suggest this is a way that people can use to get around writer's block, or to do some basic research like people do with Wikipedia in practice these days. So
I suspect that this is actually, to me, this feels like it's going a lot further. Like I always said about the online, I didn't know why. I've always bemoaned that grammar check doesn't work well. I always thought that grammar check could work by like just checking out conventions online. How do people really write? And so what's allowable and what's not, that you could do this kind of index, but they've done that on a much bigger scale. And for me, it feels like this really does. Not only like back in the day, I used to hate Turnitin, because I thought it encouraged people not to read so closely, faculty, for one thing. But I think you guys are right. It feels like the detection, if I can't really detect, and I don't have a sense yet of if I can, then maybe we do need some kind of detection thing. Though I also think that this now speaks to the evolution of artificial intelligence in a way that starts to, I don't know, do we become, I don't know, do we become some kind of version of machine people? It feels like a merging of technology and mind that's totally new, and maybe will call us in the end to some, cyborg re-understanding of
it's not going to go away. That
No,
these
it is
things
not.
are going to get better, and it's going to be something that people will be living with for the rest of their lives. So, it's a tool that's going to be out there in some form or other. But
There's a documentary about all this. It's called The Matrix.
That's just what I was thinking. Yeah.
A prequel, at least. Yes.
I guess this points to writing better assignments from us, right? So, and having these conversations again, going back to the classroom. I mean, I have conversations with students in the classroom and say, let's develop questions in the classroom that you then have to use in your paper. Because I think writing better assignments, every semester I tweak assignments a little bit here, a little bit there, just to make them a little bit more interesting for me, but also to make them a little bit more interesting for them. And I mean, in my own field in medieval studies, I've read some of the essays that are generated by these chat things, and they're terrible. They're so
Well, you may
vague.
want to try your writing prompts with this. Early versions were not very good, but the current release, this is release 3 of this, has come a long way from earlier times. So
well, unless they're in my classroom asking questions.
There's an Atlantic Magazine article by a teacher, somebody who taught high school and taught college first year writing classes, and he's saying, I don't know what you do. I don't know, that these are like really pretty good, and that they can also be narrowly tailored to assignments. So I don't know. The one thing that Amanda brought up when we had this discussion that I thought was really great was we can start asking them to compose longhand again.
I said that's what's going to be the future. We're going to have them do it in person, longhand, which is regression, but progression. It's like the craziest phenomenon.
Sadly, none of them have been taught cursive or any sort of writing. None of them know how to write anymore. So it becomes, it's this horrible, vicious cycle.
I don't handwrite like hand grade papers, but I used to do it in cursive, but none of my students could read it. So I had to abandon it years ago.
And now all their handwriting's horrible. So
the blue books are coming back. I can feel it now.
Sorry about derailing this, but I thought it was just something worth bringing up with this group.
The bookstore will start carrying fountain pens again. We could look in the version history of documents though, because if the Google Doc or whatever is just with 1 second of editing because they pasted it from ChatGPT, and you can also see it'd be harder for a student to replicate composition in real time.
I'm going to need you to screen record every keystroke, please.
Similar things.
Well, actually,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
New York City school districts have blocked it, blocked the ports for it, but but that doesn't affect the students who go home and use it. So,
Right.
okay.
Oh,
I'll let you get back to the original topic. I just thought.
that's
you know,
okay. That's okay. Thank you for the question. You know, it is something, again, that we have talked a little bit about. I will admit to like dragging my feet about, it's like the thing you don't want to know. Like, I just, I don't, I have not tried it, you know, and I have done no more systematic investigation than, you know, a little bit of kind of reading about it.
It is highly related though, because some students are always going to cheat or find ways around doing more. So that's been forever. However, on the fringes, there are students who if there weren't so much apathy and malaise, if the requirements over the past 2 years hadn't been so lax or whatever the problems are, there's a fringe of students who will cut corners, but wouldn't have otherwise, or won't if we are able to deal with the consequences of what's going on. So it does relate in some way.
I do have this nagging sense that it's maybe will be connected to a fundamental shift in the way we think about writing an intellectual work and what it is that we will become, you know, there will be some facilitation. You know, now the simple existence of the internet, you know, the idea that you can Google's and sort of know how to spell, how to pronounce, how to where, you know, if I not only find a source, but you know, the at your fingertips, you know, we have this kind of resource, I think has fundamentally shifted the way that we imagine what writing is. I think this will be I think it would be do something similar, but on a way bigger level. So I'm hoping I'm retired then.
I wonder if it's similar to what I'm seeing with friends and colleagues who teach foreign languages. You know, students think that Google Translate is like just as good. And they do their assignments with Google Translate. And then they're like, no, this is not an appropriate, you can't just shove your phone in Google Translate in someone's face and say, you know, whatever this is. You're learning so much more by engaging with the foreign language, whether it's Arabic or Chinese or whatever, because you're learning things by engaging with it. And you're actually reshaping your brain and the way you connect with people. And I think, again, what concerns me, and I see all these chats about people's concerns, is I really wonder, I want students to engage more with each other and less with their phones, less with their computers. I think there was the other note I put on my pad of paper here is they need practice learning how to be together. And I'll admit, I do group work in my classes sometimes just to get the students to talk to one another. Like, I don't care what you talk about, just say hello, introduce yourselves. And it's not that these things aren't going away, but I wonder if we could sort of acknowledge that they exist, but also have a way to say, we need to revisit what it means to be a human being. We need to connect with one another again. We need to realize that being together is okay, and that we really should talk to one another, and that doing these things sometimes the old-fashioned way helps us to reconnect with people, which is, I think, to Linda's point earlier about student trauma, we need connections with people. That's what we need, you know. I mean, that's a larger global issue, but
To like speak to the first part of what you were saying, it doesn't just stop, I think, at the modern languages. I actually had an instance, which I never thought about this past semester, where 3 of my students, they were ESOL students, they were taking their native language and translating it into English and submitting it as essays to me. And I never even, I don't know why it didn't cross my mind, but I had to sit down with them and say, that's kind of, it's not really plagiarism, but you don't understand what you're writing, so it's not really your words. And so they actually took it was amazing. They didn't come out to be the best writers, but they grew as writers because they went in and they went through English and worked with tutors. But I didn't even think to how much of what we are getting, especially from second language learners, are genuine productions of the language, which is an interesting question.
The main problem is that all of these things are tools, and tools can be used, you know, a hammer can be used to build a house or to kill somebody. So there's positives and there's negatives. I love the idea that if I'm reading a book and so there's a swatch of French. I do not speak French, but I can get the basics, you know, instantly. But then also, yes, you can generate your own essays automatically. There's downsides to it. It's about convincing the students to use the tools a favorable way.
Yeah, and I didn't penalize them. I told them right to their face, what you're doing is not incorrect in theory. Like I get why you're trying to do it, but in practice, it's it's not, I didn't know how to explain. Plagiarism is not the right word. I don't know what to call it. It's, you don't know what you're, I don't know. There's no right word.
They're not expressing themselves in another language. It's hard to
Yeah,
express yourself
it
in
is.
another language. I mean,
And-
you need practice, and you when I speak Italian, because I speak Italian, I speak it different. I'm a different person. I just
And
express myself differently, and that's okay.
And at least Amanda's students were trying to use, that they were using tools to solve a problem in a positive manner. They would, it's not, it wasn't the correct thing to do, but they weren't trying to get out of work. They were trying to use tools in a logical manner, which, that's why you weren't upset, Amanda.
One of our graduate students who was Korean noted that she had talked to some Korean students who essentially engaged in academic dishonesty by taking papers they found in a search of Korean databases of online papers, running it through Google Translate, and then it was invulnerable to any type of searches. And the English was stilted, but that was also not surprising for the instructors given the language of the students. So it was an interesting backstory.
But that's a total different thing.
It's completely different. So yes.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay. Any other Zoomdemic type? We can bring this to a close.
Yeah, probably we ought to. People have things to do. But I will say the talking, I'll put in a plug. I don't yet know what time I will schedule those sessions for, but it sounds like we have at least 2 topics. We can continue the Zoomdemic discussion. And yes, we should talk about GPT and artificial intelligence more generally in one of those. So thank you, everybody, for coming. This was a great talk.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
Good day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks again.